My name is Beth Wynn, and I am your host today with Rare Strides, where we are passionate about making rare visible in healthcare. Today, we are starting our first season, episode 1 of our Make Rare Visible podcast, and I am honored today to have Stanley and Brandy Page with us, who have taken time to come in and help us understand more about how we can make rare visible. So what I'd like to do is just start by telling you they're amazing leaders with Beck's Helping Hands, which is an incredible nonprofit. They're also parents to just an amazing child. So I would love for them to share more about their role in the rare community. And thank you guys for joining us today.
Happy to be here.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. So what is your role in the rare community, and why are you so passionate about making rare visible in healthcare?
Well, our role is obviously parents,
Mm-hmm.
but then also on the nonprofit side, we're both co-founders of Beck's Helping Hands, and our son is his name is Beck, and he's got a rare form of muscular dystrophy called Duchenne, which over time he starts to lose the ability to, do many things. His muscles over time get weaker as we build muscle. His deteriorates.
Wow.
His body doesn't produce dystrophin. And when you think about muscles, you also think about the heart, the lungs. That obviously causes multiple doctor's appointments. He was diagnosed when he was 5. So I've been on this journey for 7.5 years now. And Duchenne typically affects only boys, girls in very rare cases. And Duchenne is also 100% fatal. There's no cure for Duchenne. We base our lives on him conserving energy, even though he's still ambulatory right now. He does use a power chair or a scooter to conserve energy so that he can do the things that he loves while he still has the ability to do so.
Wow. What were some of the symptoms or signs you saw when he was shortly before he was diagnosed? What were some of the things that caused concern?
So about a year prior to his diagnosis, he had been complaining of leg pains, and I dismissed them as growing pains. I also have 3 daughters. So with him being my only boy, and Duchenne did not run in my family, so I'd never heard of it. He had been complaining of leg pains. He went on a trip to the mountains during Thanksgiving, and we did a lot of walking one day, and he just fell, and he said, my legs just stopped working. And really didn't think anything of it until about a week later. Just decided that maybe I should take him in and kind of discuss those pains. And I took him into our pediatrician, and she had been she's still our pediatrician for I think about 22 years at the time. And she had him sit on the floor and stand up, and he did what's known as the Gower sign. He was walking up his legs with his hands. I'd never noticed it before. So I think that caused her to do some labs, and I almost didn't take them to the labs because I'm like, this is silly, she didn't tell me anything. And, but I took them, tears and all, from Beck. And she called me the next day and said that his CPK levels were extremely high, meaning he had a form of muscular dystrophy. She told me not to Google it. Of course I did. And then it all kind of made sense. And it was around Christmas time, and she's like, you have to get in with a neurologist. Guess what? There were no appointments for like 4 months. So I'll be honest, I drove to the neurologist's office and I begged I said, I cannot wait. Like I can't do this. I'll do whatever it takes. And they actually got us in. But the pediatrician, she noticed it, and she had never had a Duchenne patient in her office before. She just remembered it from medical school. So luckily, we didn't have to wait months for the diagnosis. I was just very persistent, and she was too, with her just knowing. And yeah, so that's kind of how our journey began with him. And of course, you go through genetics and everything. And then I think it was confirmed January 11th, 2016, like all the paperwork. I'll never forget that day. So yeah.
What you describe is something that, we have a term in the rare community for our moms who fight relentlessly for their children. We call them mama bears. Honestly, they're incredible. And, it's a battle that we fight every single day to get into appointments that can be obscure. They tell you to wait months. We don't have months to wait. We need to get answers now, because even when there are no cures known at this time, prevention is so important. Having access to information that can help to improve a child or an adult's quality of life is paramount, because it's not enough to get a diagnosis or to even know it answers one part of the question, but we want to be proactive and do things that are going to help in the here and now, so we don't have to develop a ton of complications and problems from an illness, right? And a lot of these diseases are, the doctors will say, don't Google it. And that's a good point to bring up, because a lot of the information that's published online may be out of date, may be inaccurate, maybe, fearful post. I can remember looking at a post about my rare disease long ago that said the longest anyone lived was 42. And I thought, what? So it's, and that was inaccurate at the time. Two, there's a lot of information that should be published about our diseases. For instance, there may be a clinical trial going on for muscular dystrophy that children and adults need to know about to access. But if it's not published and it's not known, you might miss that trial. And I know that you could speak a little bit about that process as well, if you'd like to.
Yeah, sure. Actually, it's funny you mentioned the Google part. That Googled his disease a few months ago, and he does weekly counseling. He's been doing that for about a year now, to learn how to handle his disease. And he asked me, he said, Mom, I can't sleep at night anymore because I'm going to die when I'm 20. I mean, how do you, and, that's the first thing that popped up, when he Googled it. Beck has did. So when Beck was 7, he was in a clinical trial. We traveled every week, every Monday. I mean, I had to change my job, my career, everything to get him in this clinical trial. So every Monday for 4 years, we would fly to Florida for weekly infusions. Every 12 weeks, we had to fly to Iowa as his hub site to do the physical therapy testing. It was actually a 2-year possible placebo. I mean, you're putting your kid through this, but you're trying to also get data for just a little bit of hope. And he did that. And then right before, 2019, Atlanta had a site that had opened. We were able to transfer his infusions to Atlanta. We still had to go to Iowa, though, for our hub site, and any surgeries, biopsies, his port placement, everything had to be done through Iowa. And studies have shown, and this is just for his deletion, so it's not everyone with Duchenne. So studies have shown that it does produce a little bit of dystrophin, and a little bit is better than none. So it got FDA approval, accelerated thanks to Beck and other boys that were in the trial. So now we just transitioned almost a year ago to home infusions. And then Beck actually just started last year his own clinical trial for bone health in Gainesville, Florida.
Awesome.
These doctors see him, so he started his own clinical trial. They took his pilot study of his bones, and now they have a natural history of Duchenne. They've been able to start a trial with that. He does a brain study in Virginia. He does all kinds of clinical trials, and he knows that it may not help him in his lifetime, but it might help someone else. And that's actually his motto. He'll say, it may not help me, but it'll help future kids like me.
That's incredible. And honestly, it is amazing to give back to others that may face this in the future and to understand more. So I tell you what, Beck is my hero. That's what I'm gonna say. It's incredible. So I know that there, in a lot of these illnesses that don't have answers, mine included, there's some things of pulmonary hypertension side. It makes you feel good when you can contribute and participate in a trial to help them find answers. Especially in the face of being told we don't have any medicine, we don't have any treatment. That's the whole purpose of doing the trial, is to find information and answers, hopefully. So along those lines, I know that this has been just an incredible journey full of Mount Everest and at times just impenetrable red tape. Would you mind sharing, just so medical professionals that tune in can have a better understanding, what are some of the barriers that you face that really stuck out in your journey? I know that for myself, I could point out several, but would you mind sharing with us what some barriers were that you faced that may still be present today that we could work on and change?
Do you have all day? I'm just kidding.
I would say, to me personally, the top of the list would be just wait times. Because we were trying to get him into a certified clinic and couldn't get a phone call back, couldn't get an appointment. Then Brandy finally was able to find a appointment pretty quickly in Ohio with Dr. Flanagan. And, so she's actually leaving April 1st to drive all the way up there so Beck, can see a certified clinic, because we don't have one here in Atlanta.
We have some good doctors here that know about Duchenne, but it's crazy because most don't. I have to carry a little card around me. If Beck, he's had to go to the emergency room several times. He's on steroids, so they have to know the protocol on how to take care of him when anything happens. And a lot of times they don't know Duchenne. And they'll have to, and then sometimes they don't want to listen to me. And I'm not just a mom trying to tell a doctor what to do. It's a rare disease. I know the protocol, like, please take my list of things. Please call the knowing neurologist or the endocrinologist or the pulmonologist. Beck also has scarring on his heart already. Your heart's a muscle. So there's so many setbacks and so many doctors that just don't know about Duchenne. And it seems to me like you don't want to have too many doctors. I don't want to take him to out of state and then here in Atlanta, because we still seek care here too. Too many doctors dipping in the same thing, because they're never going to be in agreement. It's of the care and what is the standard of care, and it changes, and each kid is different. Each individual is different. So it becomes hard on who who to listen to. And I had a cardiologist tell me recently, when I was scared when we found scarring on Beck's heart, he can be healthy and running around all day long, but if that heart's not doing what it's supposed to do, I mean, it's, I had him tell me, he said, Brandy, I can put 100 doctors in a conference in this room and talk about Duchenne, and none of us are going to agree. He said, it's going to be like Fight Club. He said, you just have to figure out who you trust and what and what you decide to go with. And I'm like, but what is right? I don't have the degree. I'm not a doctor. Can someone just guide me? Please. So yeah, those are things that definitely, I don't want to have to drive out of state for all of this care, and we have a wonderful team in Atlanta, but again, they don't only see Duchenne patients, they're not all coming together for that. So now I have to drive out of state. I'm having to fight insurance. I can't tell you, oh gosh, how insurance is a whole nother thing, just every 6 months I have to prove that to insurance that my son can get his medicine, that he's still disabled. It's terminal, it's fatal. Like, do you want me to go through that all the time? It's just not okay. I can't just go to CVS and get Beck's medication. I have to get it from a specialty pharmacy. I don't have days to spend on the phone making sure his shipment is coming in. The struggle is just so real, and the emotions, and I mean, even for myself, and Beck, he takes it like a champ, at times. But it's very hard and challenging that this being a rare disease, and you would just you wouldn't be shocked because but the challenges you face just when you go in and they're like, wait, what is Duchenne? I mean, you're the doctor. I don't want to explain it every single time.
It's traumatizing. It's re-traumatizing to you. There's a level of almost PTSD that we experience as rare patients and families when we go to get care, because we want to be believed. We want to be heard. We want to be understood. We want to bring what took us years to learn through patching with experts and people that took thousands of dollars to travel across state lines that we didn't have, right? Some of us giving up our homes and other things just so we could do those things. And there's so much that you go through and you're traumatized with. You're right. You don't want to have to fight that same battle every month just to prove you need the medicine when it's obvious you do. That's ridiculous. You don't want to. It's almost like once somebody starts dialysis, they're in renal failure, right? From X disease. Let's say if it's something that they know is not curable, then we shouldn't have to prove why we need another session on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, right? Unless something radical happens, like a transplant, or unless this disease is gone that we had that destroyed the kidneys, we're still in the same situation. So it's like this vicious cycle. You're absolutely right about the lack of knowledge. What I like to say is that it's okay if not every doctor wants to learn and specialize in a rare disease, but they all have an ethical responsibility to know what a rare disease is and to understand how to connect that patient to the next steps and resources, even if they don't provide it themselves. It should be a standard of care. It should be expected. One of the problems that one of the clinicians shared with me who routinely treats rare patients is that when he tries to send his patients over to be admitted through the emergency room, which is the standard of how it's done nowadays, a lot of the doctors that he sends them to say they don't meet criteria for admission because they don't have certain labs, they don't have certain temperatures, they don't have, but what needs to happen and be understood, and I'm a nurse, so I look at this from a ton of angles. I'm a rare patient, I'm a nurse, and I'm passionate about saving lives. That's my only, goal here, is to improve quality of life, save lives. So if the system's not working for rare diseases, then we have to look at the system as a whole. If we have a system in place for ERs where the admission criteria says X, Y, and Z, well, rare diseases don't fit in that box. So we have to look at that. We have to relook at the protocols, the way we're doing things. If we're going in to get care in a hospital and I don't have the confidence that those providers know my disease, that's a very scary place to be. If I don't know, if I leave the room to go get a snack down at the nurse's station or the cafeteria, that a nurse or a doctor is not going to come in and hang a medicine or give something that's going to hurt my child because unintentionally they don't know about the disease, that's a very scary place. It's also very scary to talk to medical professionals when they're not willing to learn or listen about the rare disease. The thing is that you're absolutely right about children and adults with rare diseases. They don't fit into a tidy box. There is no such thing as one size fits all. A simple sepsis protocol or stroke protocol for a rare patient with Duchenne's is not going to work. Why? Because they're all different. They all have customized needs, and their conditions can change moment by moment. Just like my community with SM, our conditions can evolve and change when we're admitted. We can have all kinds of body system involvement. But just because my heart's involved doesn't mean the next patient's heart will be involved, right? So what it requires is that specialized knowledge has to be there. The specialist has to weigh in and be involved in the care. But some way, somehow, we have to get the information into the hands of every medical provider so that they understand how to connect to those resources, how to deliver safe care to their patients. And the reason I say they all have to know, and then I'll jump off this high horse because I'm very passionate too, is because every rare disease is connected to common complications and conditions they treat every single day. Things like sleep apnea, right? They all know what that is. So we just want medical teams to be more aware and willing to learn about rare diseases so that we don't fall through the cracks and so that our children, our adults can have better quality of life. That really is the reason, right? And we don't want to be traumatized over and over again. You've been traumatized enough. You shouldn't have to battle with insurance carriers every time you need treatment for your son.
I always say that people with rare diseases still get common illnesses too, such as colds, the flu. Just because you're rare, you still get common disease, we're not excluded from that just because he has Duchenne and he has a rare disease. He still gets it just could affect him differently, or it may not.
Right.
Just treat us differently.
And also, even with saying that, there's been a couple times that Beck has been in the hospital, hospitalized, and Brandy has given them, like the basic protocols, like put this into his file. Well, the next time we go, no one knows where it's at.
It's gone.
We give it to them to even put into his file, because what happens if we're not with him and he's with someone else and he needs to go to the hospital and they don't have that information? It's like, please, y'all, put it into his file so it's there. I don't know if it's there now, probably still not. So we always make sure we have, something carrying with us. But
it's almost like the allergy bands, the other bands they give you. You need something that is incorporated in the hospital systems so that when they want to access information about rare, they're rare, whatever it is, they can get to it and not have to find it in HR or some buried back room somewhere.
It should come up with a big red thing on the computer, you know, like, here it is, you know, this is, I shouldn't have to explain it every single time.
And especially since he sees a lot of doctors within that same network, you know, it should be there.
And then sometimes, a doctor will leave, you know, one of our most important doctors has left within the past year and a half, who played a special role in his care. And, you know, she moved out of state. So guess what? That left us with no one and she played a huge role in his care. And she, you know, took a job in a different state. So you can only do so much through telehealth, you know. So even by her leaving, that caused a huge stress barrier, you know, for me, because guess what? We have to wait another 9 months to a year to even get an appointment with the new doctor, who doesn't even know what Duchenne is. They just have a couple of recordings when they play a huge role in his care. So even that, you know, you're starting all over again. You know, you're going, listen to me.
Yes. You know, my neurosurgeon left Hopkins. I understand in that regard, because it took years to establish with someone who knew, right? And then when you're left without them, it's a huge hole, because they basically lead up your care team and they're the ones that believe you. And when they're gone, it's like you have to start all over finding a new captain. And that's hard to do in this, when you've only got a handful of people that even know what it truly is, that you feel comfortable making decisions about you that could be life or death. Yeah, it's incredibly frightening. The other thing that I find incredibly frustrating, and I'm just curious, this is another big one for some folks, is when you go in to get care and there's all these symptoms that you click on or whatever, there's never any that pertain to me. You find that that's the same for you?
Yes, I definitely am going down the list going, okay, well, do I read a paragraph here? I mean, nothing you're saying.
Yeah, and the other line's only about this big, and you're like, I can't fit that there.
It's like everything that's wrong with you, you have to write in the extra box, and you know it's never going to make it in the chart because they don't have a category for it. Yeah,
exactly.
It was extremely frustrating.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Dreaded paperwork. Yes.
Yes. So it sounds like, you know, there's a lot that we can do to make things better. One is the education and making it mandatory for rare diseases, and really capturing individuals interested in a pursuit in a medical career, catching them in school first before they ever get out and graduate, and then requiring yearly annual training focused on these things. Because the biggest comeback we hear from the negative side is, I never see these in my practice. Well, you think you don't, but you do. We guarantee it, you do. And it's important for you to understand this, because there's a lot of missteps that can happen that can hurt this population if you don't know. It's almost like refusing to learn about diabetes. To us, with a rare disease, it's ridiculous to say you don't have an interest in learning about it. Almost as ridiculous as it would be for a doctor to refuse to learn about diabetics and their care. That's how ridiculous and unsafe it is. So we have to do better. We have to. And the other portion is to understand that in a patient's clinical admission and stay, not all rare patients fit inside a box. And having said that, when you see a patient in the ER, when you're admitting them throughout the hospital stay, it's important to have access to information specific for their rare journey, their rare disease. And it's also important for us to connect patients and medical teams to appropriate next steps in care. Whatever is approved at the time should be opened up and accessible to all medical teams, So they have access to it. They have access to the dangers, and they understand what you should avoid with a certain population so that no harm is done. And we have to eliminate the barriers that we currently face with insurance in justifying these treatments that are not well known. We have to do a better job of maybe changing the process so that our families are not re-traumatized on a weekly basis. They go through enough, and they don't need to be put through this cycle over and over again. It's enough that we're trying to care for our children and fighting to live. We don't need to fight a battle with companies over coverage and justifying testing for these diseases. So there has to be a better infrastructure in place. Having said that, would it be helpful, and we talked about it a little bit, to have access to a different set of tools when you go in for care? Wouldn't it be great to have something focused on your rare disease rather than general? What are your thoughts around that?
I would definitely think so, and I mean, even just like a link that they can go to that's in depth, break down each thing. But it does have to be updated quite frequently because there is new medicines coming out that, help slow the progress of the disease. So it can't just be a basic outlook of it because it's not a cookie cutter situation. It's got to continuously be updated, and there's so many different ways that this disease can affect other Duchenne families because you got so many different exon skip-ins. And to me, it seems like there's a difference in each skipping or a deletion or, a mutation, duplication. And so it can't just be cookie cutter. But I understand also that you can't ever get it perfect because it's going to change every single day.
So it has to be a living, breathing model that changes and is updated on a consistent basis to with the best of the best resources. It's a challenge. It's something that's going to require a lot of work. Can it be done? Absolutely. But it will require consistency and a dedicated effort to make sure it stays that way.
When I look into the hospital systems, such as my chart, like our pediatrician doesn't use it. She's very, old school. I get that. But we mentioned earlier, we take back, so we rotate from Atlanta to Ohio, for his care. But what's really good about that is one of our doctors here in Atlanta, he actually said, you need to do that. He was never against it. But what's really awesome is the two can speak through my chart, through that tool, and they talk to each other and on Beck's care and what's best for him. A cardiologist will make a comment and they'll go back and forth. So getting them to work together is also a great tool. And that's just through my chart, clicking on there were a link and, to be able to read each note from every doctor. If everyone could do that, that would be great and extremely helpful too, because we're all working together. And our doctors here in Atlanta, I mean, they actually appreciate that. And some may not, but then most do. Even getting letters for the school for Beck's IEP. I reached out, needed all the protocols that they had recommended for him at school. And guess what? They wrote a very lengthy letter, gave it to the school, took it to our IEP meetings, just those types of tools, and everyone coming together and working for the same goal is amazing. And it takes a lot of pressure off of me when it happens too.
And that's what you need. Absolutely.
And just real quick, and also kind of like we talked about earlier, when you first hear like you might have a disease, or your kid might have a disease, don't Google it. Like, have something that doctors can give with good information that is realistic, real information, up to date, that they can give the families, so they don't have to go on and Google it and see all the horror stories or how it used to be 15 years ago versus how it is today.
So have almost like an introductory, sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, you're fine. But I was going to say, like, even like one of Beck's doctors, he's been seeing Duchenne kids for a long time, and he's calling, Beck's generation now, Duchenne 2.0, just because it's so different than what it was when he started.
Yeah. You almost need an introduction to connect you to nonprofits like yours, and intro, kind of an overview, and connect you to those positive resources at the beginning, so that you don't overwhelm and frighten the family, but almost give them enough information so that they feel comfortable in coming back to the doctor to learn more. And even saying, oh, wow, there's a nonprofit here that can help connect us to some equipment or whatever. That's a very positive thing to learn about at the outset, when you might be scared and saying, oh, I don't have resources for this. Is there something out there? And to find you, for instance, you may be 15 minutes away from a new child who's diagnosed, but if there's not something to lead them to you, the only way they're going to find out is through things like this, or incidentally, it's hard to get information out to that community sometimes. Yeah. So you're right. It's important to connect people up to those positive resources, factual information, but not fear.
Overbearing. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. You're exactly right. And then the trust factor, how important is it to you to be able to trust the doctors and the nurses and all the members of the medical team taking care of Beck? I mean, how important is that to you as a family? I know for me, it is super important that I trust my team. In fact, if one of my PAs or one of my doctors say, oh, my family member has this, I almost feel relieved, like, oh, thank God they've heard of it before, How about you guys?
Yeah, that's extremely important. I'll be honest, when people hear muscular dystrophy, they always think MS, multiple sclerosis, and they're always thinking, comparing the two, and they are totally opposite diseases. But yeah, that's very important that they, know everything, not know everything, because they're not going to know everything. But yeah, that they're educated and that they truly do know about it. And they also discuss their treatment plan, with me as well. I hate to say that I feel like I know it all with Duchenne, because I don't. I just do tons of research, and we see so many doctors that if we saw someone who says they're familiar with it, I'm going to kind of, maybe not going to say Google it, because we're not supposed to Google stuff, but look it up and just kind of, I guess, make sure they're educated. But yes, it's very important and so awesome to just know. Beck does physical therapy twice a week. He's did that since he was diagnosed, and that plays a huge role in his care. And when we first started going, he was the first Duchenne patient. And you know what we were doing? We were having him walk stairs. It was like we were teaching him to walk stairs, but none of us knew any better. We thought we were teaching him to do something he didn't know, but it was a learning curve, for all of us. And then now Beck actually goes and trains physical therapists. They call him and he'll go in, and it's a learning tool. Like, he's teaching them about Duchenne. And again, that's all of us coming together. And if we teach one person, I've talked to so many doctors and PTs and people along the way, and you know what they said? They said, I learned about Duchenne or muscular dystrophy in school for maybe about 5 minutes. And then we just moved on to the next.
Mm-hmm.
And to also to be open-minded, to not be closed-minded, to listen to other doctors' inputs that may have more experience. Because a lot of times you run into that. Beck's lucky, his doctor here in Atlanta is very open-minded, listens to anybody's input, but that's a huge case too. I mean, to be open for others' input.
But everyone can't do that. Everyone can't travel, like you said, out of state. Everyone doesn't have the ability. Once the disease progresses, even leaving your home, I mean, your travel on an airplane in a wheelchair is a disaster at times. That's your legs,
Yes.
planning all of that, having to plan an accessible room, being in the car, a ventilator, the list goes on. I mean, everyone doesn't have, right now, we are able to do that, but in the future, we may not be able to. My heart just breaks for people who can't get the right care because it's just not right. Especially when the resources can be there if needed, and just use those and understand that we're all doing the best we can. And we're all brought in this community. We all went to sleep one night as a normal family and woke up next day with this diagnosis. And here we all are, just trying to make a difference.
You're right. I mean, in the community itself, it's there has to be a united approach with all members of the medical team, the families, the specialists. They all have to come together to share this information, to really improve access and the quality of care that our children and adults get, because it does greatly impact their quality of life. And the difference between one child who has had access to these resources and one who has not is eye-opening. Their quality of life is so different, and their outlook on life is very different. And as medical professionals, we do have an ethical responsibility to do something about it. As a nurse with a rare disease that's rarely recognized in medicine, my passion has been around raising awareness and getting information to the bedside, into clinical practices that are remote. That's where it's needed. It's no longer okay to say we don't want to learn about this because we're never going to see it. No, that's not the answer. We don't do that to diabetes. We don't need to do it for rare diseases. We need to learn about them. We need to know. And for us as a rare community, we're really good. We're experts in knowing about our children and our journeys, right? And we know how to pick the good apples in the medical teams, right? Mm-hmm. When medical team members come to us and they go, wow, tell us more about this. We'd love to learn about it. Or, wow, we've actually had some children or adults. That tells us that we can build a relationship with that person, as opposed to meeting with a medical team member who immediately says, oh, I'm not talking to them, or, I don't want to hear that. You don't know what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. That response happens for probably one good reason. And the reason is there's no comfort level about the disease because that individual has not taken care of someone with that disease. So there's an immediate negative response, and one to almost like a protective mode. But there again, when those comments come up to someone who has spent every day battling for another day, to a mama bear who has been on her knees at night begging for their child to have a better quality of life, who has spent every penny in their bank account to travel out of state, we are traumatizing that family again. So as a medical team member myself, I want to appeal to those in the medical teams out there listening to please take time to learn about these rare diseases. And when you are interacting with families who are impacted with rare, know that your responses can traumatize these families. Please be aware of the way that you deal with these families. And if that's you, then I ask you, to please rethink about your willingness, why you joined the medical profession in the first place. And understand that if you don't have an interest in treating a rare patient, let them know that up front so they can move on. Because they don't have time to waste. Their life is important. My life is important, and we want to be in the care of people that really, truly care about our outcomes and giving us a better quality of life. We thank those who take excellent care of our rare community. We thank those who have a willingness to learn. And for those who want to change, who have been in that category of gruff and abrupt, then we welcome you to come in, change your perspective, and learn about the rare community, because we have a lot to share. And as you've seen today in this podcast, we have some amazing, beautiful people who are more than willing to share resources and information with you. So I want to thank you guys from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this podcast today. It has been incredible. Thank you for all you do for the rare community. And Mama Bear, you are incredible. Everything you do.
Oh, wow, it's been a journey, but we'll keep fighting.
And Beck is my hero personally, because he has such a positive outlook in the face of all that he faces. And he is truly making a difference for other children and adults who battle this disease of muscular dystrophy. So for those listening that need to connect to resources, please check out Beck's Helping Hands. They're incredible, making a difference. And tune into our next episode. Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.